The parking garage was nearly empty at 11 p.m., just flickering fluorescent lights and the echo of my footsteps against concrete. I was heading back to my car after visiting a friend at St. Catherine's Memorial when I saw her. A crumpled form next to a silver sedan, blonde hair fanned across the oil-stained ground. My heart stopped. Even from 30 feet away, I knew that hair. That jacket. Sarah. I ran. 72 years old and my knees screaming in protest, but I ran. She was on her side, one arm bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. Blood matted the back of her head. Her face was pale, lips almost blue in the harsh lighting. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands shaking as I felt for a pulse. There. Faint, but there. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with panic. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Grammy," she whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "It was Preston," his mother said. "Said our kind doesn't belong in their world." Her eyes rolled back and she went limp. I was screaming into the phone, giving the 911 operator our location, begging them to hurry. My other hand pressed against the wound on her head, my jacket wadded up to stop the bleeding. The warm stickiness soaked through the fabric. The ambulance seemed to take forever. Later they told me it was 7 minutes. 7 minutes of me crouched over my granddaughter, whispering prayers I hadn't said since my mother died, begging Sarah to hold on. "Just hold on, baby girl. Just hold on." They airlifted her to the trauma center downtown. I followed in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, Sarah's blood still under my fingernails. The whole drive, her words echoed in my head. Preston. His mother. Our kind doesn't belong. Preston Whitmore III, 28 years old, charming smile, surgical resident at St. Catherine's, and the grandson of Victor Whitmore, who sat on the hospital board. Great-grandson of Charles Whitmore, who'd founded the Whitmore Medical Group that owned half the hospitals in the state. Sarah had been so happy when she started dating him 6 months ago. She'd brought him to Sunday dinner, and I'd watched him charm everyone at the table. Handsome, polite, asked my son about his contracting business, complimented my pot roast. But I'd seen something in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. The way he glanced around my son's modest home, the slight curl of his lip at the worn furniture, the family photos in drugstore frames. After dinner, I'd pulled Sarah aside in the kitchen. "Be careful with that one, sweetheart." She'd laughed, loading dishes into the dishwasher. "Grammy, you're so suspicious of everyone." I've seen his type before. I dried a plate slowly, choosing my words. Rich boys who date girls like us for fun, until their families remind them who they really are. It's not like that. Sarah's smile was so bright, so certain. Preston loves me. He says I'm different from the girls in his world, more real, more genuine. And what happens when his family finds out you're the daughter of a contractor and a school secretary? That your grandmother cleaned toilets at the very hospital where he works? Her face had hardened then. "Grammy, that's so classist. Preston isn't like that. His family isn't like that. This isn't the 1950s. I should have pushed harder, should have told her everything. But she was 25, in love, and certain that her generation had evolved past the prejudices of mine. How do you convince someone that the world hasn't changed as much as they think? Now, sitting in the ICU waiting room at 3 a.m, watching my son and daughter-in-law hold each other and cry, I knew exactly what I should have said. I should have told her about my mother. The doctor came out after what felt like hours. Subdural hematoma, fractured skull, broken arm, possible spinal damage. They'd operated to relieve the pressure on her brain, but the next 48 hours were critical. "The police want to speak with you," the doctor said gently. "About what happened." What happened? Sarah had told me what happened. Preston Whitmore had done this to her. His mother had said, our kind doesn't belong in their world. And somehow, my granddaughter had ended up barely alive in a parking garage. The police detective was young, maybe 35. He listened to everything I told him, writing carefully in his notebook. When I repeated Sarah's words about Preston and his mother, something shifted in his expression. "Mrs. Chen, I need to be straight with you. Preston Whitmore III reported his vehicle stolen earlier this evening. His parents confirm he was at a medical conference in Chicago all day. We're going to investigate thoroughly, but But the Whitmores are rich and connected, and my granddaughter is a nurse who grew up in a split level in the suburbs. His jaw tightened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. After he left, I sat alone in that waiting room. My son had taken his wife home to check on their younger daughter. The hospital sounds around me were familiar. 38 years I'd worked in hospitals just like this one. Started when I was 22, fresh off the boat from Taiwan, speaking broken English. My mother had gotten me the job. Custodial services. Night shift. The invisible people who cleaned up after doctors and nurses, who mopped floors and emptied trash bins and disinfected rooms. We were ghosts in scrubs, moving through the halls while the important people did the important work of saving lives. But ghosts see things. I pulled out my phone and made a call I hadn't made in 4 years. My older sister Rose answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Dorothy? It's 3 a.m. What's wrong? Sarah's in the ICU. Preston Whitmore tried to kill her. A long pause. Then, the Whitmores? Yes. Another pause, longer this time. When Rose spoke again, her voice was different, harder. Do you remember what Mama kept? What she made us promise to keep safe? I closed my eyes. The journals. It's time, Dorothy. It's time. I drove to Rose's house as the sun came up. She lived 40 minutes away, in the same small house where we'd grown up. She was waiting on the porch, still in her bathrobe, holding a cardboard box that I recognized immediately. I haven't looked at these in years, Rose said, handing me the box. It was heavier than I remembered. Couldn't bring myself to. But Mama made us swear. Our mother, May Chen, had died 8 years ago at 91. Liver cancer, quick and brutal. Near the end, when the morphine made her confused, she'd grip my hand with surprising strength. The boxes, she'd whisper in Mandarin. You and Rose keep them safe. Someday someone will need the truth. Promise me. We'd promised. We'd each taken a box from her storage unit, tucked them away in closets, tried not to think about what they represented. 43 years of careful documentation. 43 years of my mother going to work at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital and its sister facilities, cleaning rooms and offices, invisible and ignored. 43 years of photocopying documents that powerful people left lying around, taking photographs of things they thought no one would notice, recording conversations she overheard when doctors and administrators forgot the cleaning lady spoke English. Because my mother had learned something early in her time in America. Being invisible was a superpower. I took the box home and spread the contents across my dining room table. Dozens of notebooks, their pages filled with my mother's careful handwriting, dates, times, names. Observations recorded in a mix of English and Chinese characters. Photocopied medical records, photographs, newspaper clippings, and one name that appeared over and over, Whitmore. My mother started working at St. Catherine's in 1976. She was 39 years old, a widow with 2 daughters to feed. She spoke almost no English, but she could clean, and hospitals always needed cleaners. The night shift paid a little more, so that's what she took. She'd told me once that she learned English by reading the papers people threw away, memos, reports, medical journals left in doctors' lounges. She'd take them home, use a dictionary to translate every word. And she'd started noticing patterns. Patients who came into the ER with suspicious injuries, whose charts got amended days later with different diagnoses. Medications that went missing from locked cabinets, never investigated. Wealthy patients who received treatments that poorer patients were told weren't available. Doctors who made mistakes that got covered up by administrators. And at the center of it all, the Whitmore family, Charles Whitmore, the founder, who'd built his fortune by buying struggling hospitals and turning them profitable, which meant cutting corners, using cheaper supplies, understaffing night shifts, denying care to patients who couldn't pay. His son, Victor, who'd taken over the business in the 90s and expanded aggressively, whose hospitals had some of the highest mortality rates in the state, but also some of the best marketing departments. I opened one of my mother's notebooks from 1987. The handwriting was shakier than in earlier entries, but still legible. The 15th of July, 1987. Dr. Victor Whitmore operated on patient today. Cardiac bypass. Patient was Angela Morrison, age 42, black woman, Medicaid. Complication during surgery. I heard Dr. Whitmore tell resident not to report it. Patient died 2 days later. Death certificate says cardiac arrest, natural causes. I photocopied chart before they amended it. Before and after in envelope #47. I found envelope #47. 2 versions of the same chart. The differences were subtle, but there. Medications that appeared in the amended version that hadn't been given. Times that changed. Notes that disappeared. My hands shook as I kept reading. My mother had documented everything. For 43 years, she'd watched the Whitmore family build their medical empire on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. Poor patients. Immigrant patients. People who didn't speak English, who didn't know their rights, who trusted doctors simply because they were doctors. There were medication schemes where expensive drugs meant for patients were diverted and sold, insurance fraud on a massive scale, unnecessary surgeries performed on elderly patients for profit, complications covered up, deaths misreported, and all of it protected by the Whitmore name, the Whitmore money, the Whitmore connections to politicians and medical boards and police departments. My mother had worked in their hospitals until she was 73, retired in 2010 after her knees finally gave out from all those years of mopping floors. She'd kept copies of everything she'd collected, made us promise to keep them safe. "Why didn't you ever do anything with this?" I'd asked her once, years ago, before she got sick. She'd looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Do what? I'm a cleaning lady. They're powerful men. Who would believe me? You have evidence. Evidence they would destroy. Evidence they would say, I stole. I'm a legal immigrant who barely speaks English." She shook her head. "No, someday, someone will need this truth. Someone who can use it." We wait. I spent the next 3 days going through every notebook, every document, every photograph, building a timeline, cross-referencing with news articles I found online. The pattern was clear, systematic, and damning. Sarah was still unconscious. The doctors said her brain was swelling, that they were doing everything they could. The police had interviewed Preston Whitmore, who had alibis and lawyers. His stolen car had been found abandoned in a bad neighborhood, conveniently wiped clean of prints. On the 4th day, I called my sister Rose again. "I've been through Mama's boxes," I said. "All of them. Rose. This is bigger than I thought. What are we going to do? We're going to finish what Mama started." I started with a lawyer. Not a fancy one from downtown, but someone who'd grown up in our neighborhood. Marcus Webb had gone to high school with Rose, put himself through law school working construction. Now he ran a small practice specializing in medical malpractice and whistleblower cases. He listened to everything, looked through a fraction of my mother's documentation. His expression grew darker with every page. "Mrs. Chen, do you understand what you have here? Evidence of crimes. Evidence of decades of crimes. RICO violations. Medicare fraud. Wrongful death. Insurance fraud. Medical malpractice on a scale I've never seen." He leaned back in his chair. "But you also need to understand what you're up against. The Whitmore family has been untouchable for generations. They have lawyers that will bury us in motions. They have connections in every courthouse in the state. They hurt my granddaughter. I believe you. But Preston Whitmore has an alibi, unless Sarah wakes up and can testify. She will wake up. I hope you're right." Marcus gathered the documents carefully. "But even if she does, it's his word against hers. Rich boy with lawyers against a nurse who might have a brain injury. What about all of this?" I gestured at the boxes. "This is different. This could work. But we need to be smart about it. We build a case first. Quietly. We get experts to verify your mother's documentation. We find other victims, other families. We make this so airtight that the Whitmores can't wiggle out." He met my eyes. "And then we don't go to the police. We go to the FBI. We go to the state medical board. We go to the media. All at once. So they can't shut us down. How long will that take?" "Months. Maybe a year." I thought about Sarah, still unconscious in the ICU. About my mother, spending 43 years watching powerful people hurt vulnerable ones. About Preston Whitmore, walking free because he had the right last name. Then we better get started. Sarah woke up 12 days after I found her in that parking garage. Brain damage, the doctors had feared. but my granddaughter opened her eyes and knew who I was, knew where she was, remembered everything, including Preston Whitmore pushing her down a stairwell after his mother, Victoria Whitmore, had confronted her at a family dinner, told her that Preston's engagement to a nobody nurse was never going to happen, that Sarah could take the money they were offering and disappear, or she could refuse and be destroyed. Sarah had refused. The police took her statement. Preston's lawyers had statements ready. It was she said, he said. The district attorney regretfully declined to file charges due to insufficient evidence, but I had evidence. For 11 months, I worked with Marcus Webb and the team he assembled. Forensic accountants who traced the money, medical experts who reviewed my mother's photocopied charts and found clear evidence of malpractice, investigators who found other victims, other families, journalists who started digging into Whitmore Medical Group's history. We found 23 patients who died under suspicious circumstances in Whitmore hospitals over the past 40 years. We found evidence of a medication diversion scheme that had been running since the 90s. We found insurance fraud totaling over $30 million. And we found a pattern of the Whitmore family making problems disappear, lawsuits settled with NDAs, complaints to medical boards that vanished, witnesses who suddenly stopped cooperating. My mother had documented it all. Every piece of paper she'd photocopied, every conversation she'd overheard and written down in her notebooks, every photograph she'd taken with her old camera. 43 years of invisible work by an immigrant cleaning lady who knew that someday, someone would need the truth. We filed everything with the FBI on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, federal agents were executing search warrants at 5 Whitmore Medical Group facilities. By Tuesday, the story was on every news channel. By Wednesday, the state medical board had suspended Victor Whitmore's medical license and opened investigations into 12 doctors affiliated with Whitmore hospitals. By Friday, the board had voted to sell off Whitmore Medical Group's assets to pay anticipated settlements and fines. Victoria Whitmore was arrested for conspiracy to commit assault. Preston Whitmore III was arrested for attempted murder after 2 witnesses came forward, emboldened by the news coverage. Turned out Sarah wasn't the first girlfriend he'd hurt, just the first one who'd survived to tell about it. The trial took 8 months. I sat in that courtroom every single day, Sarah beside me. Rose came when she could. We watched as prosecutors laid out my mother's evidence, piece by piece. Watched defense lawyers try to discredit a dead woman who'd never finished high school, who'd cleaned toilets for a living. But the documents spoke for themselves. 23 families testified about loved ones who'd died, patients who'd been harmed, employees who'd been fired for trying to speak up. Victor Whitmore got 12 years. His son, Preston Whitmore Jr., got 8. Preston III got 18 for attempted murder. Victoria got 3 for conspiracy. The Whitmore Medical Group was dissolved. The hospitals were sold to a non-profit healthcare system that actually cared about patients. Sarah got a settlement that paid for her medical bills and then some. But the money wasn't the point. It never was. I visit my mother's grave every Sunday now. Rose comes with me sometimes. We tell her about Sarah, who's back to work as a nurse at a hospital with actual standards. Who's engaged to a kind man who teaches high school and doesn't care that she grew up in the suburbs. We tell Mama that her work mattered, that 43 years of being invisible, of being overlooked and underestimated, led to justice for people who'd never gotten it before. Sarah asked me once how I stayed so calm through everything. The investigation, the media attention, the trial, the Whitmore lawyers trying to intimidate us. I told her what my mother told me. Years ago, being invisible is a superpower. They think because they don't see us, we don't see them. They think because we're quiet, we don't know anything. They think because we're poor or immigrants or women or old that we don't matter. I pulled out one of my mother's old notebooks, showed Sarah the careful handwriting, the dates and names and facts. But your great-grandmother saw everything, and she was patient. She knew that powerful people make mistakes when they think no one's watching. She knew that the truth is stronger than money or connections or fancy lawyers. You just have to be patient enough to wait for the right moment. Sarah traced her fingers over Mama's handwriting. The right moment being when they hurt someone you love. The right moment being when you finally have enough power to make them listen. When you're not alone anymore. When the truth you've been holding finally has a platform. I closed the notebook carefully. Your great-grandmother spent 43 years building a case. She didn't live to see justice, but she made it possible for us. Do you think she knew that someday we'd need all this? I think she hoped we'd never need it, but she prepared just in case. I looked at my granddaughter, healed now but carrying scars. That's what invisible people do. We prepare, we watch, we wait. And when the moment comes, we're ready. The reporters always want to know if I'm angry. If I'm bitter that it took my granddaughter being hurt for anyone to care about what my mother documented. I'm not angry. My mother taught me that anger is useful only if you can channel it into patience, into careful preparation, into making sure that when you finally strike, you strike true. People think power comes from money or status or connections, but I've learned that real power comes from being underestimated, from seeing what others miss because they think you're not worth noticing. My mother cleaned toilets in hospitals for 43 years. She was invisible to the doctors and administrators who passed her in the halls, invisible to the Whitmore family who built their fortune on the backs of vulnerable patients. But she saw everything, documented everything, waited patiently for the moment when the truth would matter more than money. That's the lesson I've tried to pass on to Sarah and to my other grandchildren. That being overlooked isn't the same as being powerless. That patience and preparation can defeat even the most connected, most wealthy, most protected families. The truth is the most powerful weapon in the world. You just have to be patient enough to use it right.